Greetings Berserkers, FiOth here, and today I have a special treat for you. I am here with Mr. Wave from the I Am Wave channel, of course. You can see his logo on the screen, you can find his channel's link in the description below, and what we'll be doing for you at the advent of the DLC is rate the bosses of Khazan from easiest to hardest. Now, because it's two of us here and there's gonna be some discourse and there's gonna be a lot of disagreement, I suppose, what we will be doing is present you with a grid, the very easily recognizable tier maker grid, and we will be placing the bosses here individually whilst discussing why we placed which one where. The way we're gonna go about the tiers themselves is that the boss that is on the leftmost side is easier than the boss that is on the rightmost side. So if we have two on our green list, let's say, the left one is an easier boss than the right one. So I'm gonna let Mr. Wave here say hi to you, and then we're gonna jump straight into the meat and potatoes because we have a lot to talk about. Take it away, my man.
Very good to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, Mr. FiOth. And yeah, let's not waste any time. Let's get straight to it.
Okay, guys, please give my boy some love. As I said, you can find his channel in the description. He's been doing a really good job, and we'll be making some stuff together in the near future. Support the content creators that you like and enjoy the vid. From now on, we're going straight into the poll, and in between I'll be showcasing some gameplay, not the cleanest I've ever had, just the most recent because I got a platinum on the PlayStation after finishing with Steam. I played this game to bits, as you probably know, and you will be viewing the fruits of my labor, rotten as they might be on occasion. So here is our tier list, and we have 5 scales here. We have punching bag, this is fine, skill check, merciless, and I found God. As you can imagine, the red tier is bosses that really gave us a hard time. Both of us are vets in this genre, but Khazan is an interesting beast. It's closer to the school of Neo than it is the Souls, and because of that, if you haven't played Neo in a long time, let's say, you'd have to readjust to the difficulty curve. I will be letting Wave pick first, because he's the guest here, we have to be polite, and then I'll be doing my placement. So, Waved, Yetuga, where do you place it? What are your thoughts?
It's hardly going to be very controversial. I think we're both putting Yetuga in punching bag, right? Let's be real.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I think I've already done it. I think he's a solid boss, but he's literally there just to teach you like the first core principles of the game. And as soon as you kind of get them down once or twice, well, once you've rumbled with him once or twice and you get those mechanics down, he's very trivial. So he obviously goes in punching bag, right?
Yeah, he's pretty hopeless. Like an excellent introduction boss, but he goes into punching bag because Yetuga doesn't really even require you to have any active skills, because you won't have any active skills by that point in the game. You just wait for him to commit to an attack, circle around him, hold down potent blow, do a backstab potent blow, and you take away like 15% of his HP. You meet him later as well as part of secondary missions. He's beefier, he hits harder, but ultimately if you can dodge that one pulverizing ice bomb attack that he does from the air, there's not really much he can do to put up any resistance. In New Game Plus, his grab is very deadly, but then again you have builds, you have your fixed attributes, all that, you're very powerful, and still he's kind of a punch bag. Like, let's just agree on that. He's on the punching bag tier. So the next one is the Blade Phantom. Let us know what you think, Wade.
Again, he's very much in line with Yetuga again. So they have contrasting stamina bar. So Yetuga has the blue stamina bar, which you can just kind of deplete indefinitely until it breaks, right? But the Blade Phantom is like the first boss that introduces the regenerating stamina. So that's like, again, it's just a learning curve. It's daunting maybe the first couple of times that you walk in on him, but once he teaches you what he's there to teach you, he again becomes very trivial.
That is true, and he's the exact same boss as Keshta that you can fight right after in the secondary mission. The Blade Phantom is a boss that foretells some of the most annoying boss behavior we're gonna have later, the regenerative stamina, as you said, but especially if you play dual wield, which is what most people played in their first playthrough at the very start of the game, and you have Gale unlocked and you just hold down Potent and do Gale on him, you deplete so much of his stamina, you take away so much of his health. He's a punching bag, a little bit more demanding than Yatga, but still, nah. He's not gonna put that much resistance up. He's pretty manageable, I believe. So, Viper, what do you think waved?
This could get controversial. Viper is a brick wall. I had to like do a double take earlier on when I was going through the list of bosses because I didn't realize he was third in the list. It kind of felt like he was a little bit later on with like the challenge that he brings to the table. I kind of tussled with it a little bit. I had to debate it a fair bit, but I'm gonna go ahead and say he should be in the I found God tier because he is just a complete brick wall for pretty much any player, experienced or not, that comes up to him. It's largely due to the fact that you don't have a build built yet and you don't have enough kind of equipment to kind of realistically fight him fairly. But I feel like he's the boss that's kind of make or break for most players, right?
Okay, that's an interesting take.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so he put it into the I found God tier. For Viper, I'm gonna say he goes into Merciless. First and foremost, his moveset is solid, but what really surprises players when they go in for the first time is that he's a two-phase boss this early in the game. The first phase has a larger moveset and a very pesky grab that can be super annoying if you're just learning the basics. The only saving grace here is that you can farm the Hunter set that is anti-Dragonkin and have some solid offense against him. The second phase, although it hits really hard, it's a much bulkier, more predictable opponent. It's just that you're sweating hard at that point. You don't want to lose, and you are going to lose a few times. But after you understand that you have to go into phase 2 with a good economy when it comes to your heals, and that you can use the willpower orbs to have some additional leeway there, he's not that, watertight. He's very challenging. He is very, very difficult for this part of the game, and surely a huge step up from Blade Phantom. But I wouldn't say he's in the red. He's in the orange. He's merciless. He will teach you how to play the game, but all in all, I think he's slightly more manageable than what I put in the red. So he goes into Merciless for me, found God for you.
Just before we move off of him there, I think the reason he goes into I found God for me, again, kind of, because I forgot to mention myself, the second phase, he is the first boss with a second phase. So, especially that early, and as you say, I completely agree, the second phase is kind of more trivial than the first. It's kind of a little bit easier to get through. It's daunting at first, but you kind of get over that fact, then he is more manageable in the second phase, I feel too. But with the stats that were kind of put out for the game, showing that the most people had failed against Viper, or rather Viper had like the biggest amount of kills to his name against all players combined. That's kind of like the stats in and of itself show that he is kind of, you can't say the hardest boss because you've got to progress through the game, and if Viper are kind of putting a stop to a lot of players progressing, then they're never going to kind of encounter those bosses, obviously, right? But
yeah, absolutely, I understand what you're talking about. Well, we'll have to take the general consensus under consideration as well. I'm just speaking from the point of view where I experienced him in the end game, because I was also there for the technical test, the beta that came out about a year ago. And he was impregnable there, man. Like, I suppose what was the initial idea, or that they nerfed what they actually put in the beta test. In the beta test, he was a menace. I struggled a bit when I got to the end product with the game as it came out for the general market, but still, I will talk about the red in a little bit. Let's just say that I stand by my belief here. And if you wrapped it up, let's move to Volbino, because I think Volbino is a much more streamlined process when it comes to what he can do.
See, I say Volbino, but we'll go with your pronunciation because it's more than likely correct, to be honest. I didn't think about where I was going to place him. I've wrote some notes about what I think of the fight. but I haven't actually thought of placement just yet. So let me just go through this. He's one of my kind of, I wouldn't say my favorite, but he's one of my favorites. He's a very fun fight. He kind of has that unique mechanic with the ladder and kind of setting the whole floor on fire, which kind of no bosses have up until that point, and no bosses kind of really replicate the kind of forcing you into another arena, right? That you have the option of going to or not. I think he's challenging at first, but as soon as you kind of learn how he telegraphs his attack patterns, he becomes way more manageable. He's like the first boss that introduces elements into a fight that kind of truly matter as well. So it's the first time that you're kind of managing, kind of dealing with the fire build upon you, as well as the transitioning from one arena to the other. But as soon as you kind of get a feel for the flow of all of that, he becomes way more manageable. So I would say probably this is fine after all of that.
Okay, I totally agree with everything you just said. My only difference in the viewpoint is that if he's here to teach you to manage a debuff build-up and have arena awareness, I would probably push him to skill check, because he's a teaching boss, you know, to an extent. As it goes for raw difficulty, fighting this oath on his own, if he was not trying to relay that kind of info to you, this is fine, would be where I put him. I'll put him in skill check, because as I said, as you said as well, it kind of teaches you how to manage elements and also be aware of where you're fighting and what you can utilize in the environment. So let's agree to disagree. This is absolutely understandable.
Actually,
you put it on this is fine.
I'm actually inclined to agree with you a little bit, dude. The like with the points that you just made, I think you're a little bit more correct than I am on the placement there, because with all of those things kind of layered on top of one another, you are right. The initial kind of curve on learning all of them, it is a skill check. It is at that point in the game too. You're only just kind of getting into your build, so it's not really too manageable in terms of like damaged out and damage received either. So there is a lot to manage, and I think you're probably more correct. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to adjust from this is fine to skill check. Because
by all means, my good sir, you honor me with a vote of confidence.
Yeah, not to align with you, but just I agree with you. I've kind of changed my opinion a little bit there, so we're going to just.
It's a discussion. It's a discussion. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Aratra. Now that's not an interesting one, as I was supposed to say here. I don't think Aratra is interesting at all as a boss. I'm gonna hear your thoughts first, and then I'm gonna relay mine.
I would say maybe daunting ain't the correct word to use at first. A little bit, maybe not even challenging either. When you first go into the fight, it can be maybe a little bit quote unquote tough for maybe the first couple of runs if you don't do it on the first time. But as soon as you discover that you can break limbs, then it just becomes really trivial again. It's arguably one of the easiest bosses in the entire game due to the breakable limbs, basically.
Yes. Where do you play her?
I'm going to say this is fine, because as much as I'm inclined to think she is a punching bag, she can still kind of CC you with the web. There are some attack patterns that can kind of grab you, deal lots of damage, and it's not abundantly obvious that you can break limbs at first either, so there is still some challenge to it. So I'd say this is fine.
I'm gonna put here punching bag, a little bit more difficult than the Blade Phantom, because I was playing dual wield my first playthrough and I had sword dance, phantom sword dance. If you lock on any of her limbs and you just do whirlwind, it pulverizes it, and of course you deal a huge chunk of damage to her as well. But what's even more ridiculous about this boss, you can take away her ability to leave the arena and do the dive bomb by destroying the explosive barrel, barrows throughout the level. So if you're thorough, she can barely go away for a couple of instances, and as she's trying to climb to get away, you can jab her to the ground for huge damage. Like, this boss can fall victim to its own traps in more ways than one. I've never died to Arata, like, not once. So yeah, man, like, it's a non-entity. I understand where you're coming from, like, especially someone playing Greatsword in the first playthrough, I think would stumble a bit with Aratra. But I think it's just a big pile of meat you can unload all your attacks on and see the numbers fly. It's a non-entity, man.
Just to clarify, sorry to cut you off there. Did you kind of main one single weapon throughout the entire playthrough, or did you switch it up? What was your approach?
My approach was one game cycle per weapon. Did 3 cycles, went dual wield, then greatsword, then spear. And now that I went for the plat on the PlayStation, I went with dual wield again, and I'm gonna let it rest for a bit, to be honest, because that's a lot of Khazan.
Yeah. Just to kind of counter all of that, I did first entire playthrough with greatsword, and then I've got 2 counter playthroughs that I haven't complete yet, but with spear and dual wield. So there are some bosses, but I've gone back to some of the bosses on my first playthrough and kind of switched up the weapons and builds, and kind of, so for the most part I've kind of taken on every boss with every weapon. So yeah.
Okay, that gives us, a more wholesale understanding of what each one entails. Rangus, take it away, because I have a lot to say about this doofus here.
Let me pull up my notes very quickly. I just moved them out the way.
Of course.
Let me find Rangus. Here we go. Right, he is tough at first. He's got some nuance to him that does take some getting used to, which is he has a few attacks in his roster that will just completely mount you, and if you kind of slip up at any point during the fight, there is a good chance that it ends right there. He's also got the fact that he's kind of like the first boss that teaches you about distance and pacing, and he's kind of got like a trick to him where if you he's always going to back up at some point, and when he does and he kind of goes into that volley fire, if you can manipulate his stamina and get in and kind of get an easy break on him, once you realize that and that you need to dodge kind of, I won't call them one hits, but some of them are, especially in certain cases. Once you figure all of that out, again, he becomes more manageable, but he's still a challenge the whole way through. So kind of in the same air of Volbeno, I'm going to go ahead and say that he's a skill check, because I think he's just lacking a bit more to be in the merciless category, but he is still very tough. So I'd put him above Volbeno in the skill check there as well.
Okay, that's a great assessment. I land the same tier as you, to the right of Volbeno. I hate him. It's the bench bro appearance. The fact that he chugs Estus to refill his stamina. That he's running away from you and zoning you all the time. He builds up burn. He can do attacks that pretty much turn the whole arena into a powder keg. He is freaking annoying. I hate his guts. The only thing here that can be consistently punished is his 4 attack string. At the end, you can just put him on his knee and hammer at him. He doesn't have that much health. He doesn't have that strong defenses, but he is so multifaceted with his movement. It's super annoying to fight a boss like this by the 25% mark of the game, let's say 30% mark. I hate him. I have respect for what they did with this boss. He goes into skill check to the right of Volbeno. I generally hate Rangus. He can go to hell, man. Like, he's a piece of poo. So, the much hated Malika. What do you think?
One of my favorite fights. I wouldn't say the favorite, but there's kind of something in the back of your mind when you're taking on his first phase where you just know, this isn't it. And if you don't have that thought, then oh boy, are you in for a surprise. First phase, very manageable. Very, very. You can get it down to the point where once you've kind of taken it on a few times, which you more than likely will, you can kind of get through that phase without taking a scrap of damage, get through it very easily. But as soon as he pulls the samurai sword out, it's a complete game changer. He's like another, and I've noticed this with the pacing of the bosses in the game as well. Going back to, not going back to Rangus, but just to touch on it very quickly, he's the first boss that teaches you about kind of the distancing and the healing too. And then Malika kind of, he takes away the distance inside of thing because he's very aggressive instead, but he still retains that healing ability whilst he's in the samurai sword stance. He's the first boss that introduces, I wouldn't say the counter mechanics, but kind of like blocking or dodging his You know the teleport strike he does? The combinations of those that he throws out, that's kind of like your first introduction to really having to pay attention to bosses and move with them, basically, and predict. And once you kind of learn that prediction, you can get through that phase a lot easier. But the trick to him, again, is getting him back out of that and back to his greatswords, because you don't want him healing. He's way more aggressive in that phase. He's got a few attacks that will just end you. His status build up will end you very quickly as well if he gets it off. So all in all, I'm struggling a little bit between the top two. Damn, this is tough.
Take your time.
I'm gonna go ahead. I feel pressured. We're gonna go ahead and say, I'm gonna say I found God. I'm gonna say I found God above Viper, and the final sign-off note as to why would be, I think if a lot of players get to him, despite the challenges that have come up till that point, I think he's really going to test you regardless. I think he's kind of one of those brick wall bosses to some extent.
Yes.
Just because of his entire kit. But yeah, you go ahead.
Absolutely agree. I named the tier because of this. FiOth. I found God because of Malika, man. I'm gonna break down real quick why. First and foremost, his first phase, you can do hitless very consistently once you learn everything, but he has a couple of combos where he ties his unblockable attack into a small combo when he initiates. If you're not prepared for it, the burst will go through and you'll get damaged even if you lock it down on the second hit, because it's usually a dual hit attack. What people don't understand, and this makes the fight for them that much harder, and I put that in my boss guide, is that Malika katana form, or Virgil, because it gives very strong Virgil vibe from Devil May Cry, he doesn't have a burst attack when he's using the katana, just a grab. That's the pierced grab. So if you keep in mind that you only have to literally avoid one grab and everything else can be blocked, you have a much easier time, but you have to really ingrain this knowledge to your moveset.
I agree. Yeah,
like,
I agree.
No burst is coming, just bring guard everything, dodge the grab, and you're golden. My last time fighting him New Game Plus, I was using my golden standard build with a spear that pretty much trivialized the entire game, but when I fought him on the PlayStation side of things, new game with whatever gear, I beat him first try, and when he went down because of the crash, ready to be brutal attacked, and he had a sliver of health, I know he would be taken out, I just sat there looking at the screen laughing, and I was like, how did this piece of shit ever put up a fight? Once you know what you're dealing with, Malika is trash. You can destroy him. But until you get to that point, he's a barrier. I totally respect the balancing they struck here, because if you can make a boss go from unbeatable to just practice mode, you did something extremely well. The mechanics are so quantifiable, they are so predictable, they are so understandable, that what was insurmountable becomes a joke, and that is a testament to great combat design. People who whine about Malika just scraped by. They never really understood the fight to trivialize it.
I can completely kind of relate to that, because he's one of the bosses that I went back to over the past 24 hours or so and took on, and yeah, I completely wiped the floor with him. But it's only due to the fact that I knew all of his ins and outs. I knew when to bring guard and how to get through his first phase very easily. I won't say, I think I wasn't necessarily locking in, so I think he still hit me, but yeah, completely wiped the floor with him, big time.
And one more thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, fire away.
One more thing that I want to underline here that people don't get: every weapon in this game has a bring guard and instantly counter move, like blowback with a dual wield, for example. You bring guard, you click, swift attack, blowback, comes out really quickly. When he does his huge-ass combo of pulse waves, that he extends the claymore and does a pulse wave, then another pulse wave, he does about 10 attacks in a row. If you can blow back in between every single one of them, you decimate his stamina and he's defenseless. You can just go ham on him. This boss is the epitome of how to turn the tables on a very challenging opponent. You literally dictate the flow of the fight once you understand it. Malika is S-tier design, and he can be freaking impossible at first, but then it becomes like a very enjoyable warm-up for what's next. Very, very much appreciate what they did here. I found God initially, then I went back to atheism, but for a new game, for the first time going through this, Maluka is a really hot boss. Like, he's gonna teach you a lot about the game. Super well designed, super hard at first. Elamane, the waifu. What do you think?
Been rolling around with this idea. I think it might be my favorite fight in the entire game, or at least one of two. I think it's a really good design, really, really cool. The sword and board, it's the first boss that you take on that has that. Not many enemies kind of have shields or shield related kind of mechanics or anything, so it's not often that you run into it. So to have an entire boss focused around that, her kind of like attacks and her play style as well kind of fits in line with just very locked down, very hard to penetrate. A lot at this point in the game, I feel you've kind of got a hang of, oh, I can be really aggressive here. Like it pays to be aggressive in this game, and I can create my own openings and my own windows. And she's kind of one of the first brick walls that you get to where that isn't the case, and she kind of forces you to learn how to adapt and how to approach things differently, and she kind of forces you to take advantage of the windows that she creates for you instead. There is still room depending on which weapon you're using. I went back and tried doing her with the dual wield, and it was a lot harder than greatsword. She was able to counter the fast aggressive playstyle a lot more, whereas the greatsword got through on her a lot more, I found. So one of my favorite fights, so I might be a little bit biased. I think she's a really good skill check on a baseline, definitely. I'm just kind of throwing around whether it's skill check or merciless for me. I didn't mention her status effect, which can be really, really brutal. So I'm going to go ahead and put her into merciless. I'm not going to get too carried away talking too much because I could.
Electricity is a very debilitating effect in this game. Like, your stamina management becomes a nightmare if you have electricity on you. So you're on merciless with Elamane. I hated her at first. As you said, greatsword has a much easier time than dual wield because you can deal that much more stamina damage due to the fact that the greatsword is a stun lock machine. She has the AoE attacks, and she's the first boss, and I think the only boss for that matter, that has a brutal attack. And when that brutal attack comes in, you're pooped. I think Elamane is merciless both because she teaches you how to manage defenses, because as you said, frontal assaults are pretty much pointless. She punishes overly aggressive play by charging up her shield with electricity. Her second phase mixes up pretty much all her moves, and that brutal attack is lethal. Like, if you get caught by that brutal attack, you're screwed. You're probably gonna die. If you reach the point where you have no stamina in this fight, you probably don't have much health either. I'm gonna place her on merciless. She pissed me off a lot at first. I learned to respect the fight. I loved fighting her with a greatsword because I totally pulverized her. It was a totally different experience than the dual wield. The spear was a mid-ground. It was fine. But I also love the music and the significance for the things to come when it comes to Khazan's fate and what he deals with throughout the adventure. So she's merciless, a little bit tougher than Viper because of her frontal defenses. Overall, pretty great design. I love her. She's pretty awesome. Saktuka, the big furry meatball. What do you think?
Big furry meatball is pretty accurate, to be honest. Big fuzzy teddy bear. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong a bunch of times here as well. Saktuka is way scarier to look at than he actually is.
Yes.
When you first go into that fight, you... Even having gotten as far as you have, he can seem very intimidating at first. But I think for most players, once you're like a minute or so in, it kind of clicks that like, oh, he doesn't really have anything outside of what I've been dealing with this entire time anyway. I'm struggling. I didn't go back and fight him, and I don't think I went back and watched, so I'm going back off maybe like 2-3 weeks of memory here. But of course, he's bound to have like an attack in his moveset, 1 or 2, that are quite challenging. But for the most part, he's very similar to like a lot of the more generic big enemies that you've come up against up until that point. So as scary as he is to look at, I don't think many players are really going to struggle against him all that much. And now I'm just deciding whether he's punching bag or this is fine.
We're at the bottom feeders again.
Yeah, because he comes too late, right? He's way too easy for where he's positioned. He needed to be earlier on to kind of pose any threat, but Volbano is just kind of a better fight of someone kind of similar size, way more nuance to that fight too. In line with how I've placed everything else, I would put Shaktuka just above. I'm going to put it in This Is Fine, just above Aratra there.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
Totally agree with This Is Fine. The only thing this big oaf has going for it is the plague. Like, dude, you can bring guard his grab. Like, what else is there to say? His burst attack deals a lot of damage and is very delayed, so it's very annoying. But it's the only thing he can surprise you with. His short combo is super predictable, and the end hit of that combo leaves him prone, and you can just hammer his head. He's a big boy, so if you're mispositioned when he gets crushed, you cannot perform brutal, but that's a non-issue if you pace yourself. Only the plague is a problem. Like, if you have 10 plague cures on you, he can't do anything. He doesn't have anything in his kit that will really cause problems. Like, the back kick that he does when you think you have his back open for attack comes out so quick, you bring guarded on reflex. You just click guard and it auto parries itself. So he doesn't have anything going for him. I put him on This Is Fine because of the plague and because he can deal a lot of damage, but you will rarely ever get hit by him. He's not as pathetic as the bottom feeders, but he's a pretty sad boss for like halfway through the game. He's pretty sad, man. That split in half jaw that you see here, he probably got that in high school. Like, he got bullied, bro. Let them off for rest. He's pretty low. Troca, let's go.
Right. This is okay, speaking 100% from personal experience, Troca was the first boss that made me go online and do a Google search. It wasn't to like how to approach her properly. It was to see if I was alone in the pit of hell that she put me in, basically. And I very quickly was glad to find out that I wasn't alone. She is now, it's interesting because there's probably a lot of this nuance for some of the other bosses that kind of can be overlooked depending on player experience level and weapon choice, right? And maybe build and playstyle too. But she was the first brick wall that I personally ran into that kind of took the most out. It was the first boss that I ran into that kind of really just halted my progress. Now, instead of talking about that for ages, to put it into a nutshell, it's basically due to using Greatsword and relying on pretty much a brink guard playstyle up until that point. She is kind of the epitome of a counter to that playstyle. And she's also the first boss that you're introduced to, other than Rankus, that she is consistently evading you and creating space between you and her. And different from Rankus is she doesn't just kind of fire projectiles at you one after another. She will kind of spam you with projectiles. And even then, she has a few spells in her kit that it's just immediate AoE damage on her. So as soon as you get in with the Greatsword, it becomes challenging anyway. See, I'm going on a tangent. Right, to keep it into the nutshell again, she was the first boss that forced me out of a brink guard playstyle into a completely different set of armor. Had to go through the skill tree a little bit and adjust things into more of a dodging playstyle. She is kind of the reality check of you do need to adapt still. Despite being this far into the game, you can't become complacent. You will still need to adjust to challenges, as well as the introduction to a lot of bosses from this point are going to jump to the other side of the arena and spam you with spells. So you need to start learning another layer of stamina management in terms of getting yourself from A to B whilst dodging and whilst still having stamina to take advantage of the damage windows, right? So personally, for me, it is kind of it has to be I found God. I'm not too sure where. I'm gonna go ahead and put her after Malika. Actually, I've already decided.
Strong words.
I'm saying that from more. I am being a little bit biased. It's more of a personal perspective. If you fall in line with my playstyle, using a greatsword, getting up to that point, which isn't uncommon for some players, she is a complete brick wall to everything you know. It's kind of like a very steep learning curve to hit. Even as experienced as I am with all the games that I've played, once I hit her, I very quickly realized that I had problems, basically. But yeah, I could talk about the problem that she was for me all day long, but yeah, take it away.
Okay, I would place her at skill check, but something happened that surprised me a lot, and that is going in New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus, where she became the biggest problem I had. The biggest in the entire playthrough. That's because Stroka without water resistance hits really hard. She's zoning you all the time. I hate the cartoonish outfit and I hate the laugh, man. That fucking laugh halfway through the entire... Shut up! Zip it! The fact that she's pissing you off and making you fight stupid, it's another tool in her kit. So she got another layer of respect from me because of how punishing she was in New Game Plus. I'm gonna put her to the right of Elamate on Merciless. She's not to the spot where she becomes an insurmountable wall, maybe because I fought her with dual wield the first time and I learned. I was also using the Ashen Warrior that gave you an additional heal, but it is paramount to go in there with some sort of water resistant. She is super efficient at dealing water damage, and once you get water damage accumulated, your stamina bar gets cut in half, and good luck beating her like that. Troka is a solid boss. Wizard bosses in these games are usually hit or miss because they're just kiting machines, but I think Troka is the worst when it comes to how evasive and spammy she is. Which brings us to Balerion. I think Balerion is a unique case in the sense that she's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. She's the sexiest designed character in the entire game. I think it's the only lady in the entire game that, you know, has the high stockings and the heels and all that thing going for her. And you go in there and expect a 100% caster, but she's pretty tricky up close. So let me know what you think about her.
I think personally you would struggle with her more if you hadn't just taken on Troka. I think Troka goes so far the other end of spellcasting that by the time that Balerion comes into the picture, it's kind of you've kind of dealt with it already. You've dealt with like the worst of it. That's come so far, and because she's like a hybrid between the two, like you say, way more manageable. I think the only element that most people will struggle on is some of her summons. Some of them are easier to deal with than others, so depending on what you get and when, it can really kind of throw a spanner in the works and cause some problems. But if you can get around that one way or another, she's no different to kind of the challenges that you faced up until that point. She doesn't really bring anything new to the table other than maybe additional enemies to deal with here and there. But apart from that, I think I did her on my no, I know for a fact, yeah, my second try. So the first time I just got really unfortunate with one of her summons, and as of that point I was like, oh, this is really kind of no different to everything up until this point. I've just got to figure out the summoning side of things and then I'm good. And then on the second run it was done and dusted not very quickly, but just very manageable fight up until that point, I'd find. And now I'm just realizing I've got to go ahead and put her in a placement. I'd say this is fine.
Okay, you go with this is fine. Good.
Yeah, just above Shaktuka.
Okay, so a little bit harder than Saktuka, you'd say.
Yeah.
Beleriand is... How should I put it? The difficulty of the fight is dictated by whether or not she will have time to summon a Reaper. If she summons a Reaper, it's gonna be a challenge. If you never allow her to summon the Reaper, it's a joke. The last run I had of the game, playing new game on the PlayStation, was my hardest time ever with Beleriand. I don't know why. I slipped up a couple of times. I got her on the 3rd or 4th attempt, I think. I was using dual wield again, pretty low level fight. You know, when you don't grind at all, you just go through the game. You just deal with whatever you're given. But Beleriand is not that big of an issue. It's well paced, she's not as spammy as Stroka, and she's not as ranged as Stroka, as I was saying earlier. Like, she will attack you in melee more than Troka will, and her AoE attacks, like the channeling pentagrams and all that shit she does, it's pretty much around her or in close proximity around her. So yes, she will punish you for being too aggressive and running out of stamina close to her, but then you are close to her and you can retaliate. You're not just getting spammed from the other side of the map. So she has to go below Troka 100%. I'm gonna place her in skill check between Volbino and Rangus. A little bit harder than Volbino, easier than Rangus. And I'm putting her here because if she summons the Reaper, you're in a bit of a pinch. If she doesn't summon the Reaper, it's smooth sailing. New Game Plus is a boss that gets totally trivialized. But for New Game, she's pretty neat. She can restrict your vision. She can do a lot of things to debilitate you. She builds up heft by doing earth attacks. She can use the fire attacks to build up burn. She has a water shield. She has a very complete kit. So harder than Volby, easier than the Doofus, way easier than Troka. Skill check in the middle. So next, our favorite zombie, Scalpel. Let's go.
Okie dokie. First of all, I really liked the one-time gimmick that plays out with this boss fight. Anyone that's kind of really paying attention will notice that they didn't get any rewards, but they'll still be they'll still be hopeful that the fight is over and done with. But I think for the most part, everyone does get caught with their pants down the first time round with Scalpel. I really like it. I think it's not an issue. It might be kind of I've seen some kind of controversy on it where people have disagreed that it shouldn't have been implemented into the game because it's just kind of a bit too gimmicky. And I guess for some people, they don't enjoy kind of having to redo the challenge, so they don't appreciate feeling cheated. But I think that's the point of the boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think if it's going to be done, it's only done the once in this game, and it is done kind of. The writing is kind of on the wall a little bit with it. There are signs there, so it's not completely kind of like taking advantage of you, right? But I really liked it because it kind of sets off that panicking you. You've got to a point in the game where you might be getting complacent with things. You've kind of taken on a lot of the different layers of mechanics that have been kind of piled on with the bosses up until that point. His first phase is kind of manageable too. At that point in the game, it's regardless of what weapon you're using, you should know enough and have enough about you that you can just kind of take him on quite easily in that first phase. With his second, it's hyper aggressive, can deal a lot of damage, kind of keeps you on the back foot. It kind of makes it hard for you to be aggressive, I feel, with the second phase, but because you can quite literally evade him that entire second phase and he will just bleed out eventually, or you could kind of do a little bit of evading as well as kind of use up whatever healing you've got and go super aggressive on him for a time, right? Because that is like a mechanic built into that fight, and because his first phase is generally quite easy. I wouldn't say easy, but just kind of like very much in line with everything you've come up against. There's nothing new. It's pretty standard for up until that point. I'm going to go ahead and put him in This Is Fine.
Okay.
Just below Balerion, I think, because you can quite literally just outrun his second phase, and I think that's what tips it for me, because anyone can do that basically.
Okay, that's interesting. Scalpel for me has a couple of things that really annoy me, and one of them is the fact his burst attacks are unnecessarily delayed. They can be very annoying sometimes if you're locked in and you break rhythm for whatever reason. That burst attack's gonna hit you, and he builds up Plague as well. The gimmick is fine because at some point you're just gonna defeat him so easily once you get his move down. Your first win against Scalpel will be like, well, that was easy because you get decimated a couple of times, but then you understand and you go in and you just wipe the floor with him and you're like, that ended up being super easy. He has an iffy grab with a casket. It comes from the left. Your reaction is to dodge into it to get the best possible iframe management, but that can actually get punished pretty hard and you end up in the casket and he damages you for a lot of health. At some point he can pretty much dictate what happens throughout the entirety of the arena, the blood rain, the attacks from the casket, all that shit. And the second phase, he is unstaggerable because he has a red stamina bar. Yes, he will down his own, but you cannot stop him. He's coming to you until he's dead or you're dead. So the fact that he's unstaggerable can make him quite annoying. And because this is the first time we fall for a trick like this, I'm gonna probably put him on a harder tier than Rangus. I think he's just at the right spot. Maybe a tad too easy for that late in the game, but he's such a unique gimmick. So he brings another thing into the mix that is like, it's not over till it's over. And because he can plague you and chip away at your health, and because you'll just have to deal with an unstoppable force at that point, he's just coming at you, no stamina depletion available. You just have to manage how far away you can get, on how aggressive you can get without getting punished. He's just at the right spot. I think it's a good skill check to realize that you will be dealing with these enemies from now on, the enemies with the red stamina bars. You can't stop them, you cannot crush them unless you deplete this whole thing. Of course, with Scalpel, that's not even a possibility at this point. So yeah, he goes into skill check, pretty safe there. It's absolutely okay for this point in the game. Princess Elena. Let's go.
Yes, right. Very, very aggressive. To be honest, I was using Greatsword and I was leaning back into Brink Guard approach, which kind of made her very, very manageable. If she is very aggressive though, and she's very fast. But again, with a Greatsword Brink Guard playstyle, she's very manageable, and I don't think I've gone back and played her with any of the other weapons. I'm just trying to think now, maybe Spear, but then Spear is pretty much, let's not go on a tangent here, but Spear is pretty much good against every boss in the game. I think she comes too late. I think she's hyper aggressive. She's got kind of a fair bit to her kit that can not necessarily surprise you, but it can kind of catch you off guard because of how fast she is. But I think compared to some of the other bosses that you've taken on up until that point, and I can compare to what you've got coming up, she comes slightly too late. I found her really manageable. She didn't really bring anything to the table that's kind of outside of anything that you've learned up until that point, or at least I don't think. I can't recall anything. I would say, to be honest with you, on placement,
I think you've made up your mind. Just spit it out. I think you know exactly where you should be.
Well, it's more where in line with the other bosses on those lower tiers that she falls into for me, because she didn't pose much of a challenge for me, but I want to kind of be general with my opinion, right? I want to be kind of the average gamer a little bit with my placement, but
it's ultimately a a personal list though, so speak from the
What
heart.
I might do for this one is I might listen to what you've got to say and then make a placement once I've heard what you've got to say, because so far on a few of these bosses you've been reminding me of like a couple of things that I forgot to kind of take into consideration right now and kind of talk about. So I'm interested to see what you think.
Okay, so Elena, the only time Elena ever gave me any trouble was my very last playthrough, like a couple of days ago. Must have died like 4 times. I was scratching my head. I couldn't understand what was happening. I was asking the crew, like, guys, did they buff her? Is anything different with her? It was just my approach, I think. I was going in too cocky, and if she catches you flat-footed on her stab combo, she can deal a lot of damage. Her whole gimmick with the crowd is creepy and nice and looks good and sounds awesome, but I never got hit by those spheres. I never even bothered. Like, you just stand in between them and that is all. At the end, she casts a little bit too much, and she can zone you with the spells or force you at certain distances where she excels with her, you know, rush through abilities, with her power through abilities. It becomes a double hit at the end that leaves a trail of chaos. She can also use chaos. Pretty solid kit, but she comes too late, as you said. I think she's just a tad harder than Saktuka. I think she's in this is fine. The big sister of the doofus Dogu. She's not a big challenge. You just have to respect the fact that she can shred you up close and pace yourself. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think maybe the difference in kind of your last playthrough and my kind of memory of her is at that point I'd kind of really got into, how do I say, like being aggressive but playing it smart. So by the time I got to her, I think I might have kind of been in like a locked in mode where I just kind of breezed through her very easily, because she doesn't really bring anything outside of what you're used to up until that point. So if you're able to, I think you can lock in. With your experience, with you having played through so much, as you say, you might have just got cocky going into that fight and kind of not taken her seriously enough for a moment there. I'm pretty much in line with you on the this is fine. I've got kind of a different placement in here. I'm going to put her after Shaktuka as well, but I think maybe after Scalpel, because I think, again, with Scalpel being able to just kind of run away from that boss and kind of indefinitely until he kind of dies himself, she would be slightly harder than, if I was being fair, right?
Okay, absolutely logical thought. I put Scalpel a tier higher, so for me it's just 2 bosses and this is fine. So she's definitely harder than Saktuka, man. Saktuka sucks. Yeah. She should be spelled Saktuka. Okay. Hizma, bro. Hizma is the hottest take in this entire game. Go ahead, and I'm gonna just spill my guts here because I've read a lot of nonsense about Hizma.
Right. I'm beginning to wish I scripted a little bit of this, other than just writing rough notes. So just kind of I wasn't so all over the place with some of my points, especially with Hizma because of how controversial he is. I'll start by saying I really like him. I think he's the only dragon enemy that we come into in the entire game, let alone a boss, right? And I think he's done in such a way where they kind of blend spectacle with game mechanics to bring something different. So you kind of have to play on his terms, and I feel like from a lore perspective, that should be in there in the gameplay too. Like the actual mechanics of the fight should be dictated by him to some extent. And in terms of balancing that on the gameplay side of things, I feel kind of having attack patterns where his head will be lowered, but you can still attack other parts of his body. But ultimately, if you want to get through that fight, you should be on the head. So then you have to like take part in the dance with him. But with him being kind of the Berserk dragon and whatnot, right? I feel like he should have that quality about him, something different that like is completely outside of your control, just due to his sheer size and the fact that he is a dragon and whatnot. In terms of the actual fight itself and his attack patterns, kind of how he paces the fight and how you have to take him on, I'm just racking my brain now because I took him on just very recently, but I had different experiences with different weapons. I mainly got on fine with the spear and the greatsword. It was a little bit different with the with dual wield for me. I would say he is a tough boss. He's kind of half spectacle, half challenge. you again kind of fall into the rhythm of needing to learn what his pattern is all about, and the couple of mechanics that are kind of unique to his fight only. But once you learn them, it's just a sheer test of endurance. You just have to endure that fight long enough until you win, basically. He can bring some kind of stronger attacks to the table. He kind of brings that one hit KO attack in when he gets to kind of maybe 1/3 health, goes into the chaos phase. But up until that point, quite manageable once you've figured it out. He can kind of bring a bit of flair into the fight as of the chaos phase. But if you can kind of get around that one attack, he again just pretty much comes down to enduring the fight. So in terms of placement, I would say, I'm probably going to be a little bit biased here as well, I would say merciless, because I think some people are going to struggle with his mechanics regardless. And I think with him kind of being a big enemy flying around, and the fact that the camera plays a bigger part in this fight than pretty much any of the others, but I still feel that isn't too bad for kind of how cameras can operate in these games. I would go ahead and put him in merciless, probably above Elamain.
Okay, brave.
Yeah.
Guys, Hizma, I think it's one of the easiest boys in the entire game, because he's huge and you can just nestle underneath him, and there you can really do whatever you want unless you get greedy or overly aggressive. Like when he pins himself in the ground with his horns, you think you have the upper hand, and he pulls his head out and damages the AoE around him, and will damage you as well for a lot of health. But ultimately he's so slow and predictable. His fire breath is his biggest weakness. You just sidestep it and go ham on his head. Any multi-hit attack destroys his horns, and when you destroy his horns, the damage to his stamina and to his health is ridiculous. The brutal attacks on the head do ridiculous amounts of damage. Everything he does can be bring guarded, except for the bite. The bite is a throw pretty much, you have to dodge it. But even that huge shoulder slam that he does in the end, you can bring guarded, man. Like, he doesn't have an answer to your reads if you understand how he works. He has a lot of health, yeah, you can go in with a hunter set and trivialize his health, because you get so much extra damage against dragons. And Hizma, guys, is a boss that respects what the game has taught you so far. When it comes to Souls-likes, I think Hizma is the most respectable dragon fight we've ever gotten. I'm not saying this lightheartedly. He's a dragon that will move without treating his entire body as a hitbox. You don't have to worry about him breathing and you getting sent to the stratosphere. The game teaches you that you can bring guard and you can bring guard him. The game teaches you that you can dodge and you can dodge him. He's a very fair boss with some camera issues because he is huge. Like, there's no ways of going about it. If the boss takes up 90% of your screen, the camera is gonna suffer a bit. Would you rather not have a spectacle fight at all in this game? I don't think so. He also ends up giving you a scroll for one of the most powerful sets in the game. And Hizma is just fine. Easier than Ilina, if you ask me. Like, never struggled. Good spectacle. Super hype when Khazan just jumps on his head again and impales him with the axe. Cool looking. Good shit. I like Hizma, and he's an easy boss. Just my 2 cents. Now.
Yeah, I'm good. Just before we move on to the final 2, I'm going to adjust Hizma very slightly, because I agree with a few of the points that you made there. I'd kind of overlooked the ability to kind of go under him and kind of like just kind of negate a lot of his attacks entirely if you get the positioning down. And a few of the other points that you made kind of does bring to light that once you kind of figure him out, you trivialize the fight a lot more than I'd kind of give credit to. It does become a lot more basic than a lot of the things that you've come up against up till that point. So I'm going to drop him down from, he's literally only moving 1, so he's going out of Merciless past Elamain down into Skill Check just above Rankus.
Okay, nice. The Bride of Despair, Reese, the catalyst for all these events, a kind soul that was about to be Horde because monarchy, and what ultimately drove Ozma past the tipping point, stopping him from resisting chaos and just giving in and saying they don't deserve to live and I'm gonna destroy everything. Ozma, one of the most understandable villains I've ever seen in a video game, and Reese, I think, is meticulously designed. What do you think? Where do you place her?
Beautiful boss fight, almost very in line with kind of some of the older Dark Souls boss fights that we've kind of grew up with and whatnot. I think overall on a challenge level, she isn't as hard as you might think once you've kind of spent a little bit of time with her. I think she's hyper aggressive and kind of very fast in places, but the frequency in which she throws out the counter potentials is kind of almost too high for this part of the game. It kind of makes her too easy with how consistently you can just counter those and get in free damage. And then on top of the fact that you can kind of play very aggressive against her and keep her inside of a pocket quite well. So bouncing between those two playstyles, regardless of her kit and a lot that she brings to the table, you can kind of just oppress her out of a lot of it. I think she's a good example of kind of the boss fight that's to come, more like a toned down version of it to some extent. But I would say overall not as challenging as I was expecting her to be, because at that point you know how to play super aggressive if you want to, and I feel like that is kind of how you should approach her, and then punish her on the counter every time, and you should be getting through that fight with relatively ease after your first couple attempts maybe. But she is still a challenge, she is still like not to be underestimated, so I'd go ahead and pop her into, before I finalize this, because I've only taken her on once or twice with the greatsword and the spear, I want to know what you think first.
Okay, I love this fight. I love the character. I love the foreshadowing, the lore that surrounds her. Like everything that happens in this game happens because of what happened to Reese. Her soundtrack is amazing. And there's an interesting duality here. Her first phase is very, very easy. The only thing that she can surprise you with is her grab that deals a shitload of damage. And her second phase is problematic for some people. I find it super manageable. Reese, for me, is the boss that I consistently defeat without any issue. And that's why I never raged at her. It's a boss that I never felt inclined to, to throw shade at. She's difficult. She's a character that transforms into her corrupted self at the last moment. You don't expect her to have mastery over anything. And that shows in the difficulty curve as well, at least to my eyes. Complete kit, interesting burst attacks. You're just there when you fight her. She's so well choreographed and so well framed within the cathedral with the music and everything you would expect from a situation like this, for Khazan to see one of his two best friends opposing him and having to take them out. I love the fight. It keeps you super focused, and because you are super focused on what's happening instead of just allowing your mind to wander aimlessly, the fight is so much better for it. And for me, she's easier than Hizma, man. She's in this is fine, easier than Hizma, but the fight doesn't suffer because she's manageable. She's manageable, but she's freaking awesome. And I have a shitload of respect for this fight because I love everything about her existence in the game. How respectfully they treated her design. She's still wearing her wedding dress. Even when she turns into this kind of succubus corruption demon, she's not just fan service. She's a very coherent design. The scythe moveset she has is cool. She retains her spells. The teleportation combo is nice, but everything is so understandably relayed to you. You know, the speed of the attacks, the range of the attacks, the damage you can expect. Her grab barely ever happens in the second phase. It's all about the melees. It's all about you bring guarding. And at this point, you know how to do it, man. You know how to bring guard. You know how to dodge. She's the perfect boss to let you breathe a bit, because then you go into the finale and all the bets are off. Fantastic boss, but not a very challenging one.
I'm glad your thought process pretty much falls in line with mine. Great analysis, by the way.
Thank you.
It's kind of what I was saying with the kind of reminiscent to some of the old bosses from the Dark Souls trilogy. She's the first one that I kind of came up against that had that kind of full package feel about her, as you say. It was kind of the setting, the vibe of the fight itself, the soundtrack, her design, the flow of the battle, everything about it just kind of was the full package. Which is why I felt kind of biased in some way. I felt conflicted because I enjoyed the fight so much, but it isn't very challenging. Which I think is kind of, it's difficult, right? When you like something so much, but you're kind of rating it in different categories, and you're kind of thinking, I don't want to place it low because I like the fight so much, but in reality, it is, I'm glad you agree, it is very manageable. I'll place just before you do. I don't know if you've gone ahead and placed on your side, but you haven't vocalized it yet. So I'm going to go for, like you say, below Hisma, but in This Is Fine, I will place her... I'm going to place her above Balerion strictly for the fact that she has a second phase. Kind of more to the fight, more of a challenge.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now the Master of Chaos, the man himself. As I said, I consider him one of the most logically motivated villains ever in a video game. Ozma can be either a 2-phase or a 3-phase boss, according to which ending you go for. The Revenge ending gives you 2 phases, the Chains and the first Berserker endings give you 3 phases. Man, this is one for the ages. We will be talking about this fight for years to come when it comes to action games. What do you think of Ozma? Where do you place him?
Well, I'll touch on him very briefly, but then I think you should go ahead and give us your analysis, because you've prepared better notes than I have for this. So I'll find it easier to kind of touch on him flowing off of what you kind of throw down here. But kind of trailing off of what you just said there, I agree. Kind of big spectacle boss, definitely one for the ages. I'll come right in and say he's got to be kind of like top 5 hardest bosses of all time, right? And there's only a select few in that category, or at least that would be my opinion.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want to touch into his mechanics too much before you kind of give what I know will be a stellar kind of overview of it all. So yeah, you fire away and then I'll fall back in afterwards.
Ozma is the culmination of everything we've learned throughout the game. And the moment you start the fight, the back and forth with Khazan is insanely in tune with what is happening. How Khazan tells him, look at what you have become, and you can hear the anguish in his voice. And Master of Chaos plays in the background, one of the best tracks in the game. You start with a hybrid Ozma who is treated as a humanoid with a white stamina bar. He has a few ranged attacks. He still comes into melee to fight you. Chaos build up, of course, you have to deal with. And he can deal a shitload of damage, but his first phase, kinda manageable. He has very few things that can go through your defenses if you're not greedy. Then comes the second phase, and in his second phase he has a couple of attacks that are super scary, like the barrage from Sky High that you have to bring guard and send the projectiles back to him, and then dodge the big ones. He has the crystal summon that he will heal himself with if you don't break it, although it is harmful to stay close to it. All this stuff is either parryable or dodgeable though. He has a grab, very well telegraphed. Like, if you're paying attention, you'll never get grabbed by it. And He deals a lot of damage. His health pool is logically large. He's not Hizma, but he can take a lot of damage. He has resistance to everything. I was looking at the codex earlier, like, he's pretty much element proof. You have to hit him with physical attacks to whittle him down. And the hype in this fight is just indescribable, man. When he goes into the second phase and the Black Moon explodes and he comes out of it with his wings in the red haze and he just sends out the shockwave, taking away your armor, and you fight him like with just the waist guard bloodied all over. It's amazing to see a boss that's humanoid offer such scale. And it's insane that we went from this to Expedition 33 with probably the most impressive fights I've ever seen in my life when it comes to some of the bosses. But yeah. Ozma was, how should I put it, was a harbinger of things to come in 2025, man. He was amazing, insanely enjoyable to fight. But I'm gonna put him in I Found God. He's harder than Maluka, but at this point he's more learnable than Maluka, because Maluka took me more tries to get than Ozma, but Ozma is definitely harder than Maluka. I'm gonna put him to the right of Maluka, but still I think that for first timers, Maluka is much more of a brick wall. Guys, I know that many people whine about Ozma being overkitted and overly difficult and all that stuff, but Ozma is perfectly designed. There is nothing in his kit that is cheap or that you will not see coming. He's absolutely fair. He's the final boss of a very challenging game. He should be bringing in the pain. And when you finally beat him by using Charon's chains, Khazan's final desperate attack on him is a tearjerker. You see two best friends so hell-bent on killing each other, and you're sweating in your chair trying to overcome the challenge. You just put the controller down and realize how much you suffered to achieve this result, and what it means for you as a player, what it means for the characters in this story. It wraps it up perfectly. I think he's one of my 3 favorite bosses in an action game of all time, both because of his writing and, you know, his significance in the lore, but also because the fight is, like, the design's impeccable. There's nothing to be said about Ozma that's anything but praise, unless you're a sore loser. Sorry if you reach this point in the vid and you're one of the people who say Ozma is cheap because I don't like losing. Brother, Ozma is god tier design. He's amazing. He just has a very extensive kit. He wants you to get good, because after this you roll credits and you've made it. Ozma is amazing. He goes into the red. He is harder than everything else in the game, but if you've been paying attention, you are equipped mentally to understand what he's doing and fight him and win.
I agree.
He is pretty much the best boss in the game and the hardest one you will be fighting. Go ahead, my
analysis. Yeah, again. I remembered so much as you were kind of going through all of that there. It's kind of touched on some of his mechanics again. I think I was meant to confirm this before jumping on with you. I'm fairly certain that his entire kit, he has the ability to kind of hit you with every element. So he can stack you up with loads of different elements in that fight, which kind of makes it a lot harder to manage what you're going to be dealing with depending on what you get hit by. I didn't struggle with it too much, but the fact that that is kind of like a mechanic and a factor in that fight makes it kind of another step up, right? You can only kind of prepare for those elemental build-ups so much. I actually haven't taken him on in his second phase form. I've only done the 3 phase every time. So every time I've taken him on, it's been like the entire thing. So I've had like the full experience with him there. I completely agree with everything you said, and he was always going to be in the I Found God category for me, to be honest. I think he was always going to be at the very top of the list, as in like the hardest boss in the game, because he is. But as you say, he is the kind of perfect combination of everything you've learned up until that point being absolutely necessary. I don't think he brings anything to the table that, I mean, I don't think he's lacking anything from that roster of mechanics, to be honest with you. I think he brings absolutely everything into that fight, and you will need to have mastered all of those mechanics up to that point in order to get through that fight thoroughly. Especially when the third phase comes into it. I think the ultimate fight there is his second phase. So regardless of whether you get the third or not, the true challenge is in the second. The third is more of a test of endurance and how many supplies you've managed to kind of transition into the third phase with. But the real fight is the second phase. All players will be facing that fight. So regardless of which kind of variation of it that you get, for the most part, well, entirely, you will be taking on the toughest challenge possible, regardless. And yeah, I don't know where I'd put him in kind of like outside of Khazan and looking into other games and how difficult those bosses are. Because it's kind of hard to translate them over because the style of gameplay on the games and whatnot. Khazan gives you a lot more aggressive playstyle options. You kind of create your own windows a lot more in Khazan than you would in kind of typical FromSoft games. So yeah, great analysis. I was just kind of leading into my placement there, but it's already decided. He is at the top. I found God right at the very tippity top of the mountain. Great boss design. Again, another thing I was meant to touch on just a moment there is as you said, the back and forth between him and Khazan. With it being the end fight, I think there's an element there that we forget about on kind of in the back of our brains as we're in that fight. We know this is it. There's kind of more riding on this. There's kind of like a higher degree of not so much challenge but weight to the fight, and I think that can kind of maybe make its way into the fight and play with nerves and timings and just kind of sweaty hands if you want to go into kind of the physicalities of it. But I think the combination of it all together and how much of a spectacle it is and how much Khazan is, some would argue, a little bit of a slog all the way through if you want to complete 100% too. So getting to that point is kind of like the ultimate challenge. And I've just realized I don't have a beautiful sign-off note for it like you did. So yeah, I found God it is.
Okay, bonus round for the people watching up to this point. Thank you so much, guys. Please drop my boy Wave here a sub on YouTube. He's doing great work, and we're gonna get some projects underway, and we're gonna entertain you and keep you company. Bonus round for you peeps. Which three bosses are your favorites in this game, in no particular order? Just give me three names and I'll give you three of mine. Wave, that's for you.
Oh, I see. Right, so I've already made it abundantly clear that Elamane is in kind of like my top two. If I was to go three, I'm gonna have to think of the third one very quickly, but Elamane kind of in joint second. Well, joint first, sorry. The next one would be Hismar, largely due to a lot of the points that you raised. I agree with it being kind of the best interpretation of a dragon boss fight that we've ever had in these games. I feel like they tried to approach it very uniquely, and yeah, it just kind of sits there in one of my favorites. I really enjoyed it, and I keep enjoying it every time I go back. For third, I would say I'm going to say Viper. I think Viper is as challenging as he is, and as how much of a brick wall as he will be for most players, or at least a lot of players. I think he's very well designed, and I think he sets the tone for the rest of the game. And if you're not willing to defeat him, then you're probably not willing to play the rest of the game either. So I feel, yeah, very well designed fight. Very well designed boss in terms of design as well. I really enjoy it. I like the fact he is a stark brick wall for a lot of players, and he forces you to learn a lot. So probably Elamane, Hismar, and Viper.
Excellent. I will say Reese, Maluka, and my favorite of them all is Ozma. Maluka, his heal burst is a bit annoying there at the end of his fight, but you can interrupt it and just go in for the kill. This was an amazing talk. Thank you so much, man. Like, talking with another person that has a deep understanding of a game teaches you things as well, putting things into perspective, because living in a vacuum rarely yields very interesting results when it comes to extending and broadening our horizons. We will be doing more stuff with Waved, so share the love, share this around to your friends, and of course let us know both your rankings of the bosses and your 3 favorites. We'll be very glad to read all your comments and discuss stuff with you. Do you have a sign-off comment, my friend, or should I just wave them bye-bye?
I do, yeah. Thanks very much for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.
My peeps, thank you so much. Until next time, be well, stay frosty, and always strive for perfection. Cheers!